Hey, it's Joe West from the West Barn with
Mike Shimshack.
Today we have Ben Fowler on. Really excited to have him on. Nashville legendary producer, and not just Nashville, all over. First, we want to remind you to subscribe wherever you're listening, whether that be on YouTube, hit the notifications and all the all button there, and subscribe wherever you're listening for audio-only podcasts. Ben Fowler is a Grammy Award-winning engineer and producer based out of Nashville, Tennessee, but he's got his start in New York City, originally from Indiana, went to Ball State. He's worked with just everyone. He's one of these names that if you're writing songs in town, you know that if Ben Fowler is the engineer on the session, there's a pretty good chance that it's a big deal and it's going to sound great. He's worked with, just the list is too long to go into, but it's Rascal Flatts, Clapton, Bad Company, Meatloaf, Leonard Skinner, Michael McDonald, Rush. Well, that is the Clapton record. Gotcha. It's just like he's one of those dudes that maybe if there's 3, 4, 5 tip top monster engineers in Nashville, his name's always on that list. Wow. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys having me here in this beautiful studio, and I know you guys, but I don't see you often enough. I think we're all, particularly now, we've always been isolated.
An epidemic to get together.
That's right.
I wanted to make sure.
I like it, but it's great to catch up with you both. And I know we have common paths, actually, through this New York thing, and let's start in New York. So
we were talking before we started. We were talking about the power station, and that you got to work at the power station before it became Avatar.
Yeah, I got there.
And now it's owned by Berkeley, right?
I think they took it over.
Yeah, I can remember that I was in New York City when they did the auction before Avatar, before somebody over in the Pacific Rim bought it. It was someone in Japan, I'm not sure. Japanese owned it and called it Avatar, right?
That's correct.
So they did an auction. So I went to the auction for it.
Yeah.
But it was in lieu of them not buying it. But I remember that day that they said that they changed the market value of Pultec EQs because of the amount of Pultec EQs that went on the market that day.
Wow. I think they had 24 in every room when I started there.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I think they've sold a few off.
And what's a Pultec cost? It's got to be $8-10 grand, right?
I have no idea. I can't afford one.
Yeah, we can't afford it. We use the, what's the word? I think the Warm Audio one is like $150.
Yeah.
Yes,
plugins work pretty good.
So you got to work in that beautiful the A room that had the fabled ceiling. That room they actually what did they do? They franchised that room so you could build that room. They sold the blueprints and you could build there's one in New England somewhere. And
correct. Yeah, Tony Bon Jovi I think has continued on, and he's built a few and maybe several, but that's his design. I have a lot of gratitude to Tony. He's the one that gave me the break, and a lot of people there. Bob Walters, his partner, but Tony, he came from, I guess, Media Sound, and he was a whiz kid. But when they built that, I guess, he was the designer, and they would move walls if it didn't feel right, visually, vibe-wise, or just in his mind, they would move it. So it's a
weird looking room too. If you haven't seen it, it's kind of like this spirally, circular, octagon rising thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's all wood, like batten board wood. And I don't know if there's absorption behind that wood or not.
There is. I think there's the burlap, and then there's insulation, as I recall. So.
And of course, connected to it was an 8068. Was there an 8068 in that control room?
There was, yeah.
Which, come on, does it get any better than an 8068 hooked up to
that
room?
Was magic. My first kind of week or two of work there was redoing the hardwood floors. I actually laid the hardwood floors in that room, so thank you.
Wow. Oh, you did?
Welcome to showbiz. I came from the farm, and immediately they handed me a hammer, so humble beginnings. So I know that room pretty intimately. But
How did you make your way into Power Station from Indiana? What was the journey getting there?
I was in a rock band, I think, about to graduate from Ball State and leave for next steps. And Tony Bon Jovi had connected with our lead singer, who was very good and a good writer as well. And we made that connection. Pat was already moving out that way. So I interviewed with him. Actually, I went out there thinking I would be a player. And then, I realized that he had a world-class, probably the finest place in the world. Their clients, when I went out there to interview, were like Billy Joel, Cyndi Lauper, Duran Duran, David Bowie, Peter Gabriel. So when you'd walk in there daily, those are the faces you might see in the elevator or walking around in the lounge. So, and that continued. So I quickly realized, like, maybe I should look into this and kind of do a parallel thing if the playing didn't work out. And as I did that, I quickly realized after seeing great basses, I was a bass player. Now I'm a bass owner. But watching guys, I remember the big moment was when I've got lucky enough to work on this Eric Clapton record, and I saw Nathan East, who was just the whole band was really kind, but I'd talk with him, and I'd watch him play. I'm like, there's no way I can.
Musician.
Yeah, he'd be doing things with his pinky finger while he was holding down the bottom that I couldn't even fathom or think of. So, it wasn't discouraging. It was almost enlightening. It's like, all right, they've got that covered. I should find something. It wasn't terribly premeditated, but, I realized that I probably have more opportunity if I stayed in the studio lane. So.
Did you start as a general assistant and work your way into?
They called them production assistants, which you were the tape librarian, you were the tape copyist. You would sometimes sequence. I couldn't believe they'd give us 2-track tapes and send us in the edit room with somebody's master tapes and say sequence the record. But that happened early on, and shockingly, I didn't butcher anybody's record. But I had very little experience of that. I think I had kind of common sense, but we did all that stuff. We made runs, coffee, whatever it was,
And this is for free, or were they paying you?
I was getting paid, but when I got my first check, we also did the bank run. That was part of being a production assistant, because back then, they'd send somebody to the bank. Some people, they didn't have direct deposit, but most people had their checks cashed, and the studio would do it. So they'd send somebody like myself to the bank and get like $10,000 worth of payroll, and you'd walk home with that, in your pocket, just hoping you didn't get robbed. But when I opened my little envelope the first time I did the bank run, I about had a heart attack, because I think it was $127. So in New York City.
Where were you living in New York?
Well, Tony created a really good opportunity. It was pretty, it wasn't very high end, but
he had a room in the elevator shaft.
Bottom of the elevator.
Almost. I lived in the utility closet on the top floor of Power Station.
Did you really?
For about a year and a half
That's
or two.
Amazing.
He had his penthouse was up there, and he said, you can hang up here. And the band guys, my guys from home, friends from home, they'd already occupied one bedroom. There's like 4 of those guys already in there. I'm like, I'm not squeezing in on them. And plus they had their own thing. They were a band and doing it. So I was already working downstairs, so I got a little futon about 18 inches wide. I guess you'd call it a futon, but I was in there beside all the electrical panels. This place was Con Edison before it was Power Station.
Nice and warm.
Yeah, so it was a fortress. Yeah, had a lawn.
A lot of white noise.
Yeah, but washer and dryer in there too, so people be coming in. It was pretty sexy.
That's awesome.
This brings up a good point. We've talked about this, and you and Mike were talking about this while we were setting some cameras up, about like what it's like to give information and share information and be mentors, or certain folks that are just wired that way, certain folks that aren't. There's also like that studio where people think, oh, you're being taken advantage of. Like there was that hailstorm that came down on John McBride because he sent someone to get his laundry or something. And me and Mike, I just think that's just like, those are the ropes.
Right.
When I was coming up, if I went and got the hamburgers at lunch and then swung by and picked up my boss's dry cleaning, he wasn't abusing me. It was what I had to do to show that I was serious and focused. And if I could then emerge onto his radar, I could get in the room. It was like...
But don't they always say, too, that if you can't handle doing the laundry, how are we gonna trust you with making a record for somebody?
Yeah, if I can't trust you with my laundry, how can I trust you to cut together Billy Joel's Master? Right? So
I don't resent that stuff at all. I mean, at that point, it's like you almost feel like, hey, I'm in show business.
Right.
And it doesn't bring you some pride?
Yeah, it really did. I remember I didn't always like it, but like I get this because I lived up top. I would get those late night calls like, hey, Phil Ramone wants candy from this particular store on the east side, so I'd have to book over there. But
what's candy code for?
It was actually legit high end,
Okay.
He was a great dude. But back to the mentor and the learning thing that you mentioned, Power Station had, I hope I articulate this right, but there was a hierarchy. So whoever the next guy up was kind of in charge. That's kind of who you reported to. And if you jacked up, he'd kind of get his ass chewed. So everybody kept each other in line. So there was a training thing from the top down, from all those great engineers. They'd had a template that worked for, when one would launch, somebody else would go into that slot. Rarely would they hire from the outside. But
why would they?
They would groom you. And if you weren't groomable, or if you weren't capable, you'd go away, So, I mean, it was competitive, but
whatever it was worked, because the best engineers on the planet all came through that system.
And the records being made there were the biggest records ever. Yeah. I mean, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Massive, massive records out of that place.
People came there because of what had already happened there, and because of those guys mostly. When I was young and growing up there, those guys were getting flown all over the world to make records too, because they were a name,
Do you have any great stories of you just like catastrophically dropping the ball, or a producer coming in on you and just annihilating you for something that was it ended up being a great learning situation, but in the moment it was devastating?
I don't know, there's a bunch of them, but one thing that may have ended up being a really career changer was I was on the Journeyman record. I started as the assistant engineer, and there was a lot of engineer changes for one reason or another over the course. I think we did 25 songs on that, and over maybe 8 or 9 months. It was a very expensive record. But every time somebody get fired, I go in the hot seat, and then I go back to the assistant seat. But one morning, I got in there early. I was setting up, and I was kind of pre-mixing, pretending this song that Eric walked in early. He was pretty punctual. He, clean, well-dressed, just really together during this period, and still has been for many, many years. And it finally worked for some reason that morning. Whatever I'd done, kind of it all meshed together. And I think it was a struggle in what I remember of, it wasn't fitting together somehow. And I cracked a little bit of a code, and he just looked at me as soon as he walked in and kind of heard that. I was caught off guard because I probably really wasn't supposed to be jacking with the tapes before the session, in their pre-mixing. But he said, "You got to go to England with us." And they were leaving in like 3 days to do a song called Bad Love.
I remember that song.
With Phil Collins.
Of course.
And, I think Pino played bass on it. I'm not sure. But anyway, we did it at the townhouse in England. But I didn't have a passport. I'd never been out of the country. And that's something that could have been horribly wrong, maybe enough to get me fired, that actually accelerated my career. So things started.
Did you go to the UK with it?
I did. They had me a passport. They had a way back then.
And so they wanted you to come.
Like that.
They wanted you to come to the UK to recreate what you had just done.
I just think he must have valued what I was doing, and I think he also realized, and Russ Titleman, who's the producer, it's like, because there were so many songs, so many parts, and such a long, thing, that I knew where everything was. So
yeah.
Anyway, so I stayed.
You knew where all the bodies were hidden.
Dude, that's one of the great things about the room's better because you're in it.
Yeah.
And that's underrated. Everybody wants to be the center of the room, but sometimes there's folks on the outskirts of the room that make the room possible.
Yeah. Yeah,
I was hoping for like a soul-crushing thing where you punched in and eliminated a part or something, but that was a good story too. I mean, we love it.
You can edit that out.
We love the good stories, but the ones that are painful are just funner.
Yeah,
they don't sell podcasts.
You can't be in a recording studio for 30 years and not have done some insanely I can't believe I just did that today.
Oh, one of the scariest things was in that period, we were doing a playback for Warner Brothers on that same record, and I think we had everything captured except Bad Love. I think we're working on a 32-track Atari machine, which was pretty new at the time, and they had a really rough transport, as I recall. And I was rewinding one of the big songs on that record, and it hiccuped. It did one of those flutter things, and it rippled the tape like an accordion. But I couldn't check it there because the president, the big boss was in the room, as well as Eric and the producers and his whole staff. So I'm freaking out because it wasn't an outtake.
Started sweating like Joe.
Yes, I did. It still haunts me though, because I thought it's digital, it's not forgiving. But somehow I got it to iron out and to play back and got it transferred.
You couldn't hear it. You couldn't hear what happened.
No, I couldn't because I was flying by and just scared me to death. Still does. Yeah.
Oh my God! What do you do?
Yeah. there's no way back if it's.
I mean, you've played it for everyone. They know it exists. At least you could say, like, it wasn't that good.
Yeah. But back then, I mean, you could, any infraction could get you kicked out of the business. It wasn't like you could go to another studio. Like maybe now you used to work at someplace in town and things didn't pan out. You had another shot. Back then, you were kind of blackballed out of the whole business.
What was this? So it was production assistant, then general assistant,
then assistant engineer, and then actually when I got the title of engineer, which was what we all craved to get, and a buddy of mine from Indiana said, if you go that route, he was already there in that band. He said it'll be a 5-year path, and it almost was to the day. Not by design, it's just how it happened. And then I got the title, and then they filed for bankruptcy. So, everything I'd worked for was, at stake. It was pretty scary because, they laid everybody off instantly, and I'm, a little bit devastated, as you would be. Best thing ever happened because it made me engage. I had to go, fortunately working at a commercial studio with a bunch of different clients, and I tell young guys this now, don't have one client, even if he keeps you busy all the time. If he gets slow or, retires, you don't have a career. You need a bunch of folks that know that, then they may only call you every couple of years, or I have people now that I haven't heard from for 5 years, and that's what keeps it alive, is that network.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
A friend of mine had a studio called Room with a View in New York City. One room.
I feel like I've been there.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It was a penthouse and panoramic views, mixing room primarily. But Michael Jackson wanted to book it for a year, and they really struggled with that because they would essentially lose every one of the clients. I can't remember if they did it or not. But to your point, it's not like a Hit Factory where it's like, we'll put him in one of the rooms, right? And
we can accommodate everybody
else. And we'll move everyone
else
to other rooms, right? So, I mean, that's interesting. You think it's a dream gig, but it's actually the death of you. So is that how did you get to Nashville?
I have to remember this. For some reason, I was lucky, I guess, because of that power station legacy. I was starting to get gigs, and I'd done a couple things in England. One of them was a Bad Company record, and one was a Meatloaf, part of a Meatloaf project that I mixed at Metropolis. I don't know if it's still there, but great, very cool studio. And the Bad Coat thing we did out at Richard Branson's Manor, which was what a place. And we were there for 4 months through Christmas time, and just beautiful because it's right outside of Blenheim Palace where Churchill was born and raised, and just a great village. So it was the most fun I ever had. But anyway, because of Bad Company, I came here. I'd mixed something in England for Meatloaf, but there was a video element, and I came here to marry it to that. I'd never been to Nashville, and being a Midwest boy, I grew up listening to some country music, but being brainwashed in New York, I thought, well, this will be, maybe backwoods or bales of straw everywhere, but I was dead wrong because I walked in those first couple studios where they were high tech, the people were super professional, kind, and a light bulb went on.
When was
do you remember
96.
96.
Yeah, 96. So anyway, I did that. It was already, I wasn't thinking about it, but it resonated with me. It's like, this is pretty cool down here. New York has nothing on this technically or personnel-wise. These are super talented, good folks. And the next morning, I had like a half a day before I had to go to the airport to go back to New York City, finally go home. And I was out driving around, and they used to put the real estate signs out front with flyers that had the listing on it and, some specs on the house and the price.
Yeah, you could open up.
That's gone now, I think. But I drove around, and I was just way out west, not too far from where I live now, and I pulled one up. I'm like, you can get a whole house for that with a garage and land. And I mean, it's changed here, dramatically price-wise, but back then it was like, wow, that,
it was like half as much as a machine room
in
New York City.
Yeah, and but it got me. I went back to New York, and I'm like, oh, I know. When I was pulling that flyer out of there, I got a call from Bad Company's manager, and they said, do you want to do another Bad Co record? And I'm like, of course. I mean, again, it was the funnest record I ever got to made because of their personalities, and I love that, the sound that they have. And and at the end of the conversation, he goes, but they want to do it in Nashville. And they want to work with songwriters and a songwriter producer, and which was Josh Leo here. So
wow.
So we got paired up. I got sent down here, and as soon as I got that call, I went back home and we are moving to Nashville. Because I knew I had 3 or 4 months worth of work. I didn't have to beg or encroach upon somebody else's work. It just seemed like the right time because we were looking to get outside the city. Still work. I'd be working in the city, but you know how it is to commute, and you have to move awfully far out to be able to get something you'd be proud of up there, particularly on what I was making at the time. Yes. So it was an easy decision, and then of course I made a great relationship with Josh Leo, which we worked together for years down here on a multitude of projects, and he's a mighty successful producer. So as an engineer, it kept me really hopping for a lot of years and gave us a good start and a good life and allowed me to network. And
was that difficult after the Bad Company record? Was there like a lull, or were you just right into records?
What do you mean?
The transition, like you had the gig, so you came to Nashville for the gig.
Right.
And then after that gig was done, was it like you just seamlessly started working, or was there like this little bit of a lull where you had to get into the Nashville?
You weren't so sure if it was good.
No, actually, because of the connection with Josh, and we got along great when we did that Bad Coat thing, and immediately he had a Warner Brothers record for a guy named Michael Peterson, which it was his first record. Michael had 1 or 2 number ones off that, so that was the first thing I did in Nashville. I thought, wow, I got this handled.
It's easy.
This is easy. Nashville's easy.
It was years before I got close to the, another number one. So, but
we told a story about that because I was at the Bluebird and I had seen Michael Peterson tell the story. So he wrote that 10 years earlier and he didn't know it then. He was working at the Boron, and so I didn't know it then, but I was a hit songwriter, and that influenced me as a songwriter. Gave me like clarity and strength to go on. Yeah. But it's probably on that record that you did.
Yeah. Probably,
that's crazy.
Probably so. Yeah, so that was good, and I continued to work with Josh, and I met Paul Brandt through him. Paul's a big Canadian artist that I think he's Canadian. I don't want to quote stats, but he's probably the all-time most record-selling or celebrated country artist in Canada. And we've done 10 records together through that early relationship. I think I started on his second record is where I came in with him, but there's been 10 projects we've worked on.
So what is your lion's share? Like you probably have a stable of producers that is like, I'm going to be working this year 80% out, 50% I'll be working with this producer. Like who are some of those guys that are your staple guys you're getting phone calls from to when you're engineering and not producing?
Well, it's weird because it's changing, and I've been in the producer's chair a bunch recently, so it's definitely changing. But Josh was one of them for a long time. I worked with Dan Huff for quite a while. I did the Rascal Flatts stuff under him, and some Leanne Rimes and others with him. But it varies now. It's just I'll do one record for somebody, and then I won't hear from them for a couple of years, and then I'm back on. But recently I've been doing a few things with Chrissy Metz, she has a TV show on called This Is Us, but she's a Universal artist, and I'm doing that with Derek Wells and Jimmy Robbins and Maddie and Tay with them. So there's some of the younger guys and very talented folks that I'm lucky to get the call from, and I love it. Do
you prefer just engineering, or do you prefer producing engineering? Or does it not matter?
I like it all. I think I like that it changes all the time, because I love when I can go just think about sounds, and not, producing's a whole different thing, and people think that you're in the studio, but getting to the studio is the hardest thing. It's, getting your cast. I think I cast really well, but once if I'm in the producer's seat, if I have players in mind that I really, really want, nobody else will do, So, but to get that puzzle to work, I always think is the hardest thing about getting a session together, and getting the right studio. I'm lucky I get to work at really great studios in town, and to get all that, to sync up is the hardest part of the puzzle. Once you get in there, if you've got great songs and great singer and great musicians.
When you're producing, do you like to have another engineer in for the tracking date?
Always have a really great assistant engineer, and these guys they're all launching. They're all getting, engineering careers of their own. So they're on the verge. So yeah, they're reaching over, and I always give them permission. It's like, hey, I'm a little distracted, which doesn't take much. Just reach over and grab it if you need to adjust something, whatever it is, or make something better. And I trust.
Generally speaking, when you're producing, you're still hands on the console.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Yeah. I'd probably drive somebody nuts if it, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah,
like, hey,
sure.
turn that up.
I'm sure you spend so long. That's like, it's second nature.
Yeah, if it's just a little thing, but it's right there, and I'm comfortable there too. So that's my comfort zone. But yeah, I think it may happen at some point if the phone keeps ringing that way that I, have somebody that I'm used to working with track for me, because a lot of the young guys have kind of learned what I do. So I'm sure they're making their own styles, but they would know how to.
We've been wondering if there is a healthy young crew of this kind of legitimate large format tracking engineer able to handle it all, like what we used to think engineers are, what you are, right? Maybe what I came from. Me and Mike have speculated, like, I wonder if there's a new crew coming up to take over that, because the songwriter becomes the engineer, right? And it's changing, it's evolving, which is fine. But what do you think that next generation of large format recording in town, who's doing the engineering, what is that? Well stocked?
I do think so, and I think, and I see it a lot. It's surprising how, first of all, the guys and girls are unbelievably smart. They've got the computer side down. Nothing about running Pro Tools or quickly editing on the fly, or tempo changes on the fly in a session scares them. But they've also, if they're working at Ocean Way and Blackbird and Tracking Room, which sadly is going away, but those guys are top notch, and they've got it down. And I think a lot, first of all, they're bright, but they're working behind a lot of top notch engineers that are, that's what they're learning from. And I guess that's, how we all make our own style, is working for a lot of folks and then kind of learning what you like from each of them, and then, put yours together. But I could list like 5 right away that are just fantastic, that are going to have great careers. So
that's encouraging.
Yeah. And if you had it totally up to you, and someone said the drums we need incredible sounding drums, what's some of your favorite drum rooms in town? If it's a rock record, that the drums are going to be a massive part of the record.
Blackbird D is fantastic. I like that chamber that comes with it. I like my up close drums to sound super tight and defined. But man, if you add that chamber to it, I think a lot of people see me put kind of maybe baffles around, or some like rugs and things around the drums to make it tighter up close. But I lean on the room mics a lot, and that probably came from the Power Station days, because room was a big part of the sound of those records. So, but I like to have both, and you never know once what opinions or direction of the record can change in the middle of an overdub. So
it's got to be flexible.
It's like, so they're covered either way. So I tend to track where I can cover. It's like, hey, we want this really tight and almost no room. Where if you shut the room off, it is that. So, or the other way, where if you want it, thunderous or space around it. But I like Blackbird D. I've recently tracked 2 or 3 things in Studio A at Blackbird that have come out fantastic. Same deal. I think for me, it's just getting comfortable in the room, and obviously, if you get a great drummer that tunes really well, the results are fantastic. I always like the tracking room is good. I felt like I had that rock room over there dialed in pretty good.
Yeah, there's an ISO booth with rocks on the walls.
Right, yeah. You could control that pretty good with a little foam baffling. Also, the piano room over there was fantastic, too. Yeah. So you could put drums in there, and it was, had that kind of aliveness that like a Power Station Studio C would have, but controlled.
You don't have to name names, but are there studios in town that whenever you say, we're going to go and do this record here, you're just like, you're dreading it because the tech is kind of beat up, or you're just not happy with the acoustics of the rooms?
Yeah. Well, maybe so. My biggest thing is, like, can we get the session up and running? Because Nashville's different than, like, what we did in New York. It wasn't like if we were a 10 o'clock start or whatever in New York, people would start rolling in, start
10:40.
Setting up.
Totally.
2 o'clock, you might start kind of maybe thinking about it.
By 2 o'clock here, they're in the next session.
Yeah, but certainly budgets have changed and probably affected that everywhere. But I think about that a lot. Who can get the room up and running? Because sometimes some creative spaces open up, and they're like, let's try it out there. It's like, yeah, but you got to get 6 songs in a day. It's like, if you don't get rolling till 11:30, it ain't happening.
So a lot of it is just like, hey, we want some known quantities because there's so many unknown quantities, right?
Right. Yeah.
So there's probably how many rooms would you say you're consistent in a given year? You'll work in these many different rooms in one year. let's say? Is it 10? Is it 100? Is it
really 4? I often get to pick the studio, and if it's in town, it's probably toggles between the 4 of them.
Yeah.
So occasionally there's someplace new and interesting, and I hope that there are more studios coming online soon, because we certainly need them.
Mixing wise, are you doing? We talked earlier before the show about you have a rig at home. Revelation.
Yeah, Mike Shimshack asked him if he maybe had a rig at home. I think he's gonna.
I just imagine Ben going to all these glorious studios all the time, and you're like, well, because we asked Vance Powell. Vance doesn't have a rig at home.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vance was on the show last week. I was like, yeah, I asked the same dumb question. He's
All
like,
right, you're right.
He's like, no, I don't have a rig at home.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't want a rig at home,
Well, sometimes I don't want to rig it there either. People know you have it, so you can work almost.
But are you mixing a lot of the stuff at your own studio now at home?
Everything.
Okay.
For probably 10 years. And,
no kidding.
Yeah. And occasionally somebody will ask, hey, I want to be behind a big console. And it's funny to watch that dynamic, because when they see you, even if you're playing your final mix from home and they're looking at the console, it's just going through the monitor section, like, see, it's better.
Right.
So I have to do that dance occasionally, but most people know now. It's gotten really good. So.
We tend to nerd out a little bit on, like the actual gear itself. What does your home studio look like? What's that setup look like?
Depends how busy I am. It can look pretty nasty, but it's a small room. It's probably 15 by 15, and I have an old 100-year-old house, and it's just a room inside of there. And I had a room at Ocean Way for a while, a mix room up above Studio B Lounge, I guess. And it was fine. It was great. I loved being there, but I have kids, and so I put a duplicate one at home, and 2 things, trying to maintain both of them, software-wise and tech-wise. And,
right.
I found myself going to because I could come downstairs, go right in there and get to work. Found myself spending more time there, so we dissolved the Ocean Way one, and I just put all the focus on that one. And it was the best move I did.
Is it a hybrid setup? Are you using any outboard gear, the home studio, or is this all in the box now?
Yeah, it's all in the box. There's gear sitting everywhere, but I think plugins, software.
What are some of your favorite go-to plugins that you use that you feel give you what hardware gave you, kind of thing? Or maybe not. Maybe it's something totally different.
I mean, I use a lot on not every channel, but some things will be a combination of a lot of things. But I love the wave stuff. I think that there's a lot of creativity in there. Studio Rack is going to be pretty cool. It's already out, but it's going next level soon. Love the UAD stuff is fantastic sounding. Creatively, I love Isotope, and also for restoration, that stuff's fantastic. Sure. I just touched something that desperately needed rescuing, and the Isotope RX was the secret. So
that thing is like voodoo.
Yeah, it is. And there's a bunch of smaller ones too. I mean, there's obscure plugins that I use too that nothing else will do. So they're creative tools, and when I get something new, it kind of makes me feel more creative, or reinvigorated to dive into that. And I probably overuse whatever the newest tool is, but keeps it exciting, and so
that's cool.
And are the plugins? Were you trying to migrate the plugins under the guise of repeatability, quick recalls, blah, blah, blah? Or was it you're there with no issues from sonic compromise? It's not like you hit the transformer, or you missed the...
Yeah, I don't think of things like that. I mean, maybe I should. Maybe I'd work faster if I did. But I think every song is its own deal. Even inside a record of, the same artist, I think they each need their own journey. So I don't use templates. I know I'd save a lot of time, but I don't start with the same stock. All right, I'm putting this on the drums, or this on the vocal. Again, I'm not a fast mixer. I mean, where some people I hear, how fast they can mix a song or two. It's like
or 16.
Yeah, I can't do it. So probably have more money if I could, but my process.
I think it's beautiful though that there's guys in town. Some guys do that, some guys don't, and it's the same format, it's the same medium, it's the same tools. They both come out with really great conclusions, really artistically valuable pieces with it's such a scientific field, you wouldn't think you would get that.
Right.
But I still love that the human being is the biggest part of what a record feels like at the end.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we haven't gotten to that point where it's disappeared.
Well, every sound is different. Every voice is different. So you can't expect the same, tools or tricks to work on everything. So I don't know. It's just an experiment, and I like to go as far as I can. And those guys I learned from in New York and beyond, I mean, they were dreaming big. You get guys like Jason Casaro on the Power Station, Robert Palmer Records with, they were trying to go into new territories.
Yeah.
And those, Dave O'Donnell, who still is very alive and making music with James Taylor. Alex Haas was another guy, but Jason and, just all the Neil Dorsman and, they were dreaming bigger than just like, hey, this is a band in a room. And I'll speak on that a little bit too. I never like records, this is going to sound weird, that sound like they're in a studio. I want to feel when I listen to a record that I'm somewhere. I don't want to be able to, pick it apart and say, oh, I hear they're in this studio or that. I want to hear a performance like maybe you're in a club, but just a sonic landscape that's different than a perfectly recorded thing. So I'm more attracted to, I guess it's vibe. It's its own unique vibe. Sure. So I don't know if I achieve it, but I'm certainly trying each time. So
how long does it take you to mix a song? On average,
the first one on a record, I actually now kind of work in circles, and if I mix, say, 10-song record, I'll probably mix 5 of them to kind of get my feel and figure out what's really working for that. Go back and touch those up, but I'll learn a lot once I get into the middle of the record, see what the complexion is for the overall record. So, but that first one takes me a long time because I'm probably in my head too. It's like, are they going to like this? I still do that a little bit, but I have to remind myself, generally if I get really happy with something, if I'm over the moon about it, they're probably going to like it too. But it's still tough. You're like, man, I've never worked for this person. I don't know what their tastes are. It's like they're going to hate this. So you're kind of thinking a little bit about that while you're mixing. And, I'm lucky to have pretty prominent clients that if they don't like it, they're like, all right, that's good. They can go get somebody else to do it, Yeah, so
they're not trying to get their money's worth out of you.
Right, yeah.
They're moving on.
They have enough money to try it again. But I try to hook it, and I spend way too much time.
Is that a day?
Day and a half, 2 on the first song or 2.
Maybe a song a day after that?
Yeah, then I can get up to that groove. And there's always a song either that comes together really fast, and the one that they always say, oh, this one will be simple, is always the hardest one.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
This one only has like 4 tracks.
Yeah, it's super simple. I don't charge by the track. If I charge by the track, I'd be rich because the sessions you get have 120 tracks in them.
Yeah, it's weird, but I do appreciate when a session's properly cleaned up when it's delivered to you.
Oh my goodness, that's the worst.
Yeah, because you can, if something comes to you in a mess, you spend 2 or 3 hours doing cleaning it up, editing stuff.
So do you do all that yourself, or do you have someone set up your sessions?
I do, because at times I'll have one of my guys come in and clean it up and set it up
after he gets your dry cleaning.
Right, exactly.
He's too busy working on the roof for him to sort out your Pro Tools session.
Putting a new floor in.
So, can you tell me? I wanted to get back to your flexible drum sound. Okay, so for me, this is what I imagine a flexible drum sound is: 2 mics on the kick drum, 2 mics on the snare, hi-hat, toms, overheads, stereo room mics, mono room mic, maybe over the shoulder mic. What do you, when you're putting together something that you may not be mixing, and it's like, oh, I don't want to commit too hard, but I want to make sure these guys have options without being overwhelmed with 4 sets of overheads, right?
Right.
Like do you have a staple, like 90% of the time, these are what your drums look like?
Yeah, well, I'm guilty of over-recording because I think, and I do it if I'm mixing it and following the project, but I do a lot of mono room mics that I call them trash mics or, mono rooms or whatever, and they have different sounds depending where I'm at. Sometimes it's, similar to what I've done last time, but, and sometimes they're magic. They become the bulk of the sound with some close mic dialed in, but it's the personality, those trashy things. Obviously, at Blackbird, and Ocean Way, they have a variety of kind of cool and vintage, mics that have character. So I always record those, and if I'm working from somebody else, I'm like, if it doesn't sound good, just mute it, because that's what I would do, because usually one of those trashy or roomy things is great, and the others just don't.
And you may not know that till the whole record's produced.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So
when you said that, it's like as a kid, I always thought, let's get the best drum sound. But then you realize the best drum sound, your perception of the best drum sound, may have nothing to do with what this song is going to eventually become.
Right.
Right. So
yeah, and I think
give them a drum sound they can work with.
Yeah, and a hired engineer, that if you're just there for the track and you don't really know what the whole thing is, record. I mean, don't be silly. Don't record 32 mics, but put a couple room mics up. Sometimes I get things to mix, and you're looking for that mic that you can grab a hold of to give the drums some personality, because the track might not want an effecty bit that you can do. We can do a multitude of things in the box, but sometimes you need to get it on the tracking date just to get that glue or that personality. So sometimes I'm disappointed that people don't, put that on tape, even if it's junk. I will say I did something, it was about a year ago, and the group and the producer were from out of town, and they just loved it the day we were home there, and just real grateful and thankful. Later, about 9 o'clock at night, I got a text that said, "These room mics are unusable."
Oh no!
And he was referring to the trash mics, which are pretty trashy and grungy and distorted on purpose. But he was really put off. I haven't heard from him since.
Well, shoot! I mean, you should say, "Well, then don't use them." The purpose is that they are like a super opinion printed.
Yeah.
How many? So you're like, can you go through like just in? You tell us if it's not something that you ever do the same way twice. But is it 2 mics on the kick? What?
Yeah. I mean, I usually have something in close, and I change that a lot. If it's not magic, I want it to be inspiring for the tracking date, and also that if it sounds like shit on the tracking date, nobody's inspired, and you probably won't get hired again. But I think if the players are inspired, regardless if it's kick or their guitar sound or whatever it is, they're happy. They're going to play better. So I try to get it great and sound like a record while we're in there, the closest I can. So I do have a kick in, which is probably 90% of my sound most of the time. There's an outside kick, which sometimes, if it's more of an art piece or whatever it is, that might be the guy. And for tracking weight, I'll put, if there's a sub kick in the room or if the drummer has one, I'll have that on. But I would say most times when I mix it, I don't.
You don't use it?
Yeah, I don't need it. Once I get back in my place, can kind of hear what's going on.
What percentage of the stuff you're working on are you putting drum samples into? I'm sure
a lot.
Well, I'm sure a lot of it is like that's part of the sound.
But it's always mixed in. I rarely mute the
it's
original.
Reinforcement, not
right.
replacement.
It's either weight or crack or something, some kind of character. But
some of the music you can't compete unless it's in there. It's
and I know that even on the tracking dates, like this is going to need some more weight, and a lot of stuff gets additional production anyway. But snare, I'll have a top and bottom. I used to overthink that a lot, but phase is a huge part of getting the drum sounds right, and it's sometimes as short a time as we get to get sounds these days, you don't get a lot of time to get the perfect combination, but you try to get close. But it varies and depends where I'm at. I always ask if I'm at a new studio or hey, they're like, hey, what do you want on this? I'm like, surprise me, because that's how I learn too, because I used to learn from other engineers. I'm the only one, if I think I'm going to do it my way each time, I'm not learning anything. So sometimes the assistant engineer, second engineer, will turn me on to something that's mind-blowing. That so that's how I stretch too. So, and I want them involved too. It's a collaboration. I think the whole thing we do is a collaboration, and people forget that your cast of players, getting everybody involved for that mutual purpose is what this is all about. And me as the engineer or the producer or whatever, it's not my record. I don't have to go sell it. The mutual purpose is making something we're all proud of for that artist. So.
So let's say standard, just about everything, normal drum kit miking. Your overheads do you do a lot of space pairs, MS, XY, Glenn Johns? What?
I'm pretty simple. I get really close because I know I'm going to have room mics. I'm right over those cymbals because I hate it when you don't have the impact of the crash. And that happens a lot on tracks that I get that are in studio. But this last season, I've done a bunch of kind of live performances that I just did mixed Willie Nelson and Friends, his 85th birthday, and I did a tribute to Waylon, Emmylou.
That's so cool.
Just a Merle Haggard, So it's been a lot of those, but they're live tracks and great musicians. But sometimes the cymbals are really high. If you want impact from the crash and you need it for excitement, you just can't. You're turning up the auditorium, or well, in these cases, they're arenas, so they don't mean anything. But even in the studio, if I want to hear like almost the stick hitting the cymbal, which I do, and then I've got options because I've not got room.
Let's say this is a crash over hi-hat.
Yeah.
Where would you put a mic if this was where it was at? Like how far off?
So this is
just I'm on the outskirts of the cymbal.
Yeah. If it's more ballad-like, I'm going to be 6 inches. I mean, if he's bashing.
And small diaphragm condenser mics is what you're using?
I use 269 sometimes and big silver ones. But Tubi,
those are my favorite.
Yeah. But really Tubi, great overheads, and I'm lucky I get to use those. But I'm not above using something lesser if that's what.
And how many overhead mics will you have? If you're doing that, you might need more than 2.
I'll do 2 and usually have a ride there.
Okay.
And I'll kick it on something I just mixed. I'm really glad I had
so the ride will stay off and you'll turn it on if and when.
I'll edit everything else around it.
Okay, so tell us about your room mics. Like, where would you put them? How many mono room mics? Do you do stereo room mics?
I do.
So you do a set of stereos. Are they spaced or binaural? Or?
Yeah, in Ocean Way, what do they got there? Is it the M50s or what are the big guys?
M49 Helios.
Yeah, they just sound great in the middle of that room. Again, if you walked in there, you'd probably see some small gobos around the front of the drums. The drums are still filling the room, but it's not thrown back into the room's not thrown back into those close mics. But usually a stereo pair, and it's not super scientific. It's kind of just whatever's in my head that day, and I
spaced pair or binaural or
it's spaced. Yeah, it's pretty wide. Just the way I learned and the way my brain works too. But I'll go out there between songs a lot, and hopefully, I'm engaged every time. But you'll see me like when the band's learning the next song, I'll be out there moving mics and.
Sure, with a room mic, it makes a big difference. Tempo, right?
Yeah.
Tempo from one song to another.
Yeah.
Will allow or disallow a room mic.
Yeah, and there's so many. We all have drummer friends and favorite drummers, but those guys they're tweaking. Same with the guitar players. They're mixing their sound, and whether it's drums or guitars, but those guys are masters of sound. So I'm out there moving with them. So you get a guy like Fred Eltringham or Nears, same way, because we're all friends with Nearsy, and I've worked with Aaron Sterling once. And, they go out there, and for each song, it's never the stock. I'm leaving out a lot of great drummers. We're lucky to have the world's best around here. But they'll custom make their sound, each thing.
We were talking about this. It's like,
I love that.
When you get around greatness, it actually opens up windows that you didn't even know existed in regards to, like, why would you ever go out and move drum mics? Well, because they're giving you something different.
Right.
Because they're not your run-of-the-mill drummer.
Right.
So now you're smart enough to notice that, but it's like, it's actually, if you hang around great people, you can only become greater at whatever you're doing because there's more information in the room.
It lifts everything up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was a kid in Pittsburgh, it was the same rock band over and over again. So why would I ever move the room mics? It wouldn't even occur to me.
Right.
But
you're thinking about so many different things at that point. It's hard to, now I think we've done it long enough that some of the little things you can focus on what's important and have a broader awareness.
You start to notice, like, wait a minute, something's different.
Yeah.
Why? Okay, now what do I need to do to react to that? That's a cool thing. And you only get it in a city like that's super progressive like this musically, right? Where guys are really pushing super hard, and you're like, you're starting to get into the nuance of what they're doing, and then if you can capture it as an engineer, then that's why you win a Grammy, is because those records, get noticed and they start to have a story about them.
Yeah,
that's
I
a
like
cool
to move with the musician if they're moving towards something.
So these room mics you're talking about, what are they? Are they like U47s? Are they SM57s? Are they close? Are they far? How many?
They're usually 67s, sometimes 87s. We're talking pre-show about 87s. I think Power Station, I don't quote me, but one of my early jobs was doing mic inventory every morning. So, because they had so many mics, but I think we had 27 87s. So we use that on a lot of things, and it's hard to go wrong with,
Right. So when you're working at Blackbird, that has this.
I don't even look.
Unreal. But do you ever come in and go, I just want to do something different. I'm going to just try something different. Do you ever go and just go, John McBride surprised me with something fun?
Well, I always ask, there's several great guys over there that I depend on, and I'll ask them what's great, mostly for vocals or drums, but also try not. I learned this too, working behind a lot of engineers, not to let the equipment or the gear get in the way of the performance, because sometimes you're overwhelmed when you go in a room like that or other. There's so much great stuff around you. It's like, oh, I want to try this, and then the band's waiting on you. And you can lose their motivation or their vibe. So I try to pick it straight away, and not, I do like to experiment, but it may be one area. It may be, all right, I know what everything else is going to be. So the rooms, let's try something.
Or you put like an MS mic so far down into the kit that they can't play like they want to play.
Right.
Because you want it there sonically, and it's a C24, it's down here, you're trying to get this thing, and it's like he can't do any of the things he needs to do.
I tell everybody, all musicians that you trust, it's like, hey, if that's in your way, just move it. They know where to put it too, so I'm not possessive about that. But
I was on a record in New York with Frank Filippetti and Phil Ramone, and the drummer was Simon Phillips, and Frank Filippetti used all SM57s on the toms, and Simon has a lot of toms. But I was just like, I thought it was beneath him, until he turned up the faders, and I was just like, man, never underestimate a simple piece of gear. It's like you're a Blackbird and you have access to like the first, doesn't he have like the 001 C24?
That's crazy.
Stereo C12. Yeah. He's got these mics that are just fabled, and he's got everything over there. It's just like, this is like on planet Mars. But don't underestimate. And we were actually recording in a billionaire's studio, a private studio in upstate New York that was just genius. And it had that kind of gear. And Frank puts on these 57s, and I'm just like, has he lost his mind? What do we need to do? We need to course correct here. And then you just like, you're humbled and you learn like, wow.
Yeah.
They sounded incredible. It was just like, it is like, it's not just the gear, but it's how he metabolizes it, right? And you watch these great guys when they get behind a console, especially a large format console, just because it lends itself to this. But you're like, you just see him like touching faders like, like they're electric. And they're just like.
I remember with Neil. So Neil, I worked with Neil a lot in New York, Neil Dorson in New York City. And he would always go, you think the vocal's loud enough? I'd be like, I think you should come up with it. I mean, he pushed that fader maybe 0.2. I don't think he really wanted to hear what he was just asking to be polite. I mean, he would push that fader out like.
There's that great story George Massenberg told at AES, and then he got in trouble for telling it, which was he was doing Maurice from Earth, Wind and Fire. He was mixing a record, and it's before automation or early stages. They weren't mixing this record with automation, and they're all mixing this record. There's like 4 of them along this giant console, and Maurice had the kick drum down here on one, and so when he soloed it, he could hear it because it was PFL, and he could EQ it. Then he put it back in, but the real fader was routed over, and George Massenberg had it over here, and because he just Maurice would just keep pushing the kick drum, and it was just like he said that he eventually got into a lot of trouble for that story because but you've got to do whatever you need to do to make a record, and these guys like George Massenberg, Frank Filippetti,
Al Smith. I worked with him on something early on. I was lucky enough to because they would do the really highbrow stuff and a lot of jazz at Power Station, Nora Jones. But Al's thing was great mics, in the Neve, his magic, but not a lot of outboard gear. But it looked simple, but it sounded amazing. Yeah. But he knew what he was doing.
And if you could do a post-mortem of that, and you looked at your faders, if you were to pull it up, not yours, you proverbial you, and his, you would see that there's a lot of math difference. I mean, I'm blown away at how much we spend all this time focused on plugins and outboard gear and mic pre's. But like when we just interviewed Tony Platt about recording AC/DC's Back in Black, and in my mind's eye, I had imagined what they used to record that. And when I found out it was an MCI console to an MCI tape machine, I was just like, I couldn't compute. I short circuited. But the reality is, it's like it's in the fingers, right? It's in these little. It's in level. It's not in the things you think it is, right?
They would ride those things instead of compressors on everything. Right. Which we mix with compressors now. I mean,
how many internet arguments are about faders? Yeah. None.
Yeah.
But they'll kill each other over mic pre's and compressors and EQs.
Well, and but that's also like to your point. We had another guy on here, Dan Malsh, who had Andy Wallace. And you know, again, Dan has all this beautiful outboard gear everywhere, and he's just he has an SSL too. Everything was done on the SSL. Yeah. He said there was one like SPX 90 or something like that for a little reverb or delay or whatever. That was it.
I think you said this earlier. We could have stopped talking about this 20 minutes ago. Options will kill you. Yeah. You will. They used to call it, when I was in EMT, they would call it splinting someone to death. You show up on the accident scene, you start fixing people's elbows. Meanwhile, they're bleeding internally, right? Yeah. It's like you split them to death because you just, death by 1,000 cuts. There's so many things these new engineers and people, even us old engineers, we are inundated with that are supposed to change everything for us, to be our secret silver bullet, right? It's like you see this new thing that Slate has out where you can mix in any room. You can mix in a car. They have a car, some sort of like software that will allow you to, as if you were mixing in a club, and hear your mixes in what they would sound like in a Jeep. And great concept. I love it. It sounds like a silver bullet. But the reality is like there's so much that I bet you it's more important, the chemistry on the faders, than any of that stuff. And we never even talk about that.
Absolutely.
The greats that we were lucky enough to be around during the greats, and to have that opportunity to be in a room with someone like that and watch them was priceless. And now you're that to someone, which is super cool, right?
Well, I don't know, but you brought up something that made me think of, like, people will mix forever without the vocals in. Mix for hours and hours and not have the vocal in. But as soon as you put that in, your drums are a whole different thing.
Right.
So I think that's when you got to grab those faders and make that puzzle work.
Or you did that gag where you put a bunch of cool delay things on, and then you don't realize the vocal's sitting in all the places. You just lay delay.
Yeah,
I did that I think I did that for 10 or 12 years.
Yeah. I still make mistakes, so I'm still learning. Yeah.
What do you fall into? What trap do you continually saying, oh, I did it again? Is level a thing? Is low vocals a thing? Is it too loud kick drum thing, or too much bass on your mix? Is there anything that you're like, man, I need to watch myself because I'm like prone to do this?
Well, I don't know if there's one thing, but bass is tough. I'm a bass player, and I pride myself on having thick sounding tracks, but I don't always get it right. So I think, like you said, that physically going to your car, listen, a lot of people, I got a call the other day.
Well, you don't need to do that anymore because you can use this plug-in.
Yeah, I'll still go to the car.
It's like that scene from that movie where they went up in a spaceship, a Wall-E, where everybody's just rolling around in chairs with like Slurpees going into they're like, they don't even see each other. That's what we've become. Like, we don't even have to go to our car to check a mix anymore.
Yeah, and it's good to stand up. I think we all sit too much. So,
pull down the 1998 stock Camry stereo system, and it's like it's in your
Panasonic boombox. Well, I actually have one of those, and it's plugged in. It's called the Ben Sonic, but I still use that. But people listen on iPhones, and I got a comment on a mix not too long ago. They liked the mix, but said the vocal's kind of loud, and we determined they're listening on the phone, which they can listen right away that way, but you're getting judged on. You never know what you're getting.
Sure.
The tools you're getting judged on. But
I don't hear the bass.
Yeah, but I work on that bass awfully hard because, sometimes you can be deceived. Like your guitars don't sound very thick. It's not more weight on the guitars. It's getting that bass up around there a little bit, that support. So those things I try to be conscious of, and And again, you've heard this a million times. It's not always adding things. It's taking away little bits of other things, so things fit together there. So
when you're mixing a record and somebody sends it to you from wherever, L.A., Topeka, Kansas, who knows, Canada, if you don't like stuff, do you just leave it off, or like they give you?
I do, yeah.
I was telling Mike I do that too, and if they ask me to bring it back on, I'll turn it back on. But
rarely do they mention it, and I'm not possessive about it. It's not my record in the end, but they hired me to do my thing, so I figure if I feel that's not important to the record, I'll leave it muted or make it inactive, and like you say, if they ask for it back, I'll put it in. But it happens a lot. But I think everybody's guilty of over producing or adding too many elements when they're not important. A lot of guitars are like that. Electric guitars, you get things that have 5 guitars playing all the time, and maybe 2 of them need to go away, maybe more.
Have you ever been in a tracking date where they're like, hey, give me another track? And I'm like, why?
Right, yeah.
Let's stop and think. If you're producing the record, you're obliged to say like, hey, this not just give me another track and I'll roll through for something for the right speaker.
Yeah.
Like, let's think about a different part.
Yeah.
Let's think of a capo and a different voicing, like you're in a different key. Let's find something that's totally compatible. Let's find something that we're going to actually want to turn up. and hear is different. So many people track double guitars, but what they don't realize is when you track double guitars, your brain does this thing when it hears stereo information, and it does this thing that's like the difference between Mutt Lange background vocals that are giant bed vocals and Rascal Flat vocals. Like when you did the Rascal Flat, those records were fantastic for lead vocal, and then you could see the other guys.
Right.
These two guys, they weren't like whacked out stereo guys that you felt.
Right.
You saw them as much as you saw the lead vocal. It was a conscious decision. So, you know, people will fall into that. More is better, but sometimes more is just more.
Yeah, and I think of things too, like there's always been a trend to make things super stereo, but you've got to have mono elements to make things stereo. If you want extreme stereo, those mono elements
That's
are the
right.
things that are going to, otherwise everything's just
What are you looking
white.
at?
Yeah.
You have to have, things have to show up. The thing I loved about, and I'll use Sheryl Crow as an example. You get a Sheryl Crow record and you just be like, boom, right there.
Mm-hmm.
There's that acoustic, the neck, the really meaty tube mic on that acoustic, and it's right there. It's Tom Petty. Right there it is. Mm-hmm. And it's like, now I know, like you're talking about, you want people to feel like they're in a space, in a place, whether it be, a live venue or whatever. You want them to, like, if everything is just what came out of the stereo keyboard, well, then you've got a vocal and you've got everything else, which is kind of, the stereo stuff is cool because it gives you this, right? It gives you a sense of left and right.
Yeah.
But it's not what you see. When you put two electric guitars playing the same part, left and right, it can be powerful, but you feel that more than you see it.
Right.
And then you got a guy like Van Halen records, those first Van Halen records where he would drop out and do the solo. So there's no guitar. It's like, there's something really special about that. You'd argue like that's not a good decision, but you knew exactly where you were in that song.
Yeah, solos were so good you didn't miss the rhythm guitar.
It was just as powerful. And then and they were mono. I don't know if they were mic stereo, but those early, Diver Down, those early.
All 57, by the way.
Are they?
Really?
Are they stereo or mono?
No, what he would do is the dry signal would be panned to the left and the reverb would be to the right.
Like an ambient mic. And they were just like, how much more guitar? How much more of a powerful guitar? Like if that wasn't a endorsement for like, hey, just get a great guitar sound.
And turn it up.
And then when it's Eddie Van Halen, you're like, there it is. I hear it. If he had a bunch of tracks going, it'd just be this.
No, it wouldn't be the same. The fact that you can hear every note he plays.
And this is the secret of being great in the music business. And I tell people, you will never get a well-rounded education on YouTube. Even though all the information's on YouTube, what you're missing is a philosophy.
Yeah.
You have a philosophy of how the world of audio works. You have a worldview of audio. You say, this is what I want from this. This is what it is to me. I understand it's what it's capable of and what it's not capable of. And you have a philosophy. If I worked with you as an assistant for X period of time, I would be able to say, I can think. I'm going to give you your version of this. I can understand your worldview and build a mix off of it. That's what people need, are good mentors that are willing to do that. It's not, you can find everything you need to know on YouTube, but you'll just confuse yourself because each one of those guys have a different philosophy about music.
And I think the best thing to do is get out there and record everything you can. If you're a young guy, I still do it. I say yes a whole lot more than I say no. And I'm lucky. I'm getting calls that are from, hopping genres all the time. And I love that. It keeps it fresh for me. But I meet new people. I meet new musicians and I learn new styles. It's healthy in every way. So, but that's the best way I think people can learn, and I'm still learning that way. So
another thing people can glean from this, ideally people see themselves in you. People that want to become at your level, they'll watch this podcast and they'll say, I can see what I could become, right? I could see myself in him. One thing I see in you is that you're just, I don't know if there's a more agreeable person. Like, it'd be hard to get into an argument with you. Like, it's the same thing with session musicians in Nashville. They have a good heart. They want the best for the record. Like, I could hire you as an engineer and know that it would probably be my fault. I'd probably have to cross the line in order to have a bad day with you.
Yeah, well, I hope so. But that's, I think I always had that personality, just my Midwestern ways.
But you're in a position that you have to have opinions and make decisions.
Right.
That's a tough thing to do, right?
It really is. And if you do get sideways with somebody, man, there's only one person you're going to blame at the end of the day. If you lose it, if you're in my position or whatever your role is, if you kind of lose it and don't handle the collaboration or the controversy well, you're going to be mad at yourself if you blew it, because that's just I guess maturity and people skills, and those top level musicians that I often get to see, they've got it all. I mean, they're the world's best, but they've got people skills too. They know, just how to negotiate. And
that's we spend all of our time focused on a very narrow margin of how we're preparing ourselves to be great in the studio and join a culture and become successful in a culture. But those little fader moves.
Yeah.
Right? Keeping an open mind, being able to have a decision and be a leader through influence and through like Socratic questioning, so you get the best interest of the record.
Yeah.
For a guy that has to produce and mix records, you have to have really definitive worldviews on what that is.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to work with everyone.
Right.
If you could get those two things, people don't spend enough time on that part of their game.
I agree.
If you could get that, I mean,
Yeah.
you'd just be zooming right by people.
Yeah, one really poor personality in the room when you're tracking can crash the whole thing. Both productivity and the results. So I think it's important you get people in there that are there because they want to be there first of all, and they're capable of being there, and then they want that, like I said earlier, that purpose, whatever that is. And in our case, it's a great song and a great recording. So yeah.
We didn't touch on it much, and we're near the end here, but you're the vice president of NARIS, the Grammys.
I'm the former vice president.
Okay.
I'm lucky to be there for a few years as a board member, and just a great organization, and do a lot of good works on behalf of producers and engineers and other industry professionals. So,
what was that? Tell us a little bit about what happens in a year at the Grammys. Like, what are the things you're voting on? Is it like Music Cares stuff? Is it?
Yeah.
Are they mostly initiatives for quality of life? I'm a little like.
Well, I don't know recently because I've been off for a couple of years, but they, probably the most valuable thing they do is Music Cares. It's, you guys know, but they look after people that are having tough times, whether it's health or maybe addiction or just slow work perhaps, but they're a safety net for the music industry, and they do a fantastic job. But that largely, I think, operates independently, from the board. The board's updated on that, but they do fantastic work. But this chapter had a very active producer engineer wing. It's probably very much so, but they came up with the deliverables document for, going from tape, where we used to turn in the tape and the safeties back in the day, there were the masters, but now with hard drives going everywhere, there's, requirements that just getting everybody on the same page, so the owners of the content get their music at the end of the day, because so you've probably seen that deliverables document if you've turned it into something to Sony or Universal. Or
I'm sure they probably have some sort of best practices when it comes to COVID and studios. And
yeah, I think that came out. I don't know if it was maybe it came through the Grammys. I'm not sure, but they do a lot of that. And I always thought one of the best things they did was just kind of getting people together like us for conversations. That's how we learn, because we're mostly isolated in rooms, maybe with our clients, but often by yourself. I'm sure when you guys are mixing or editing.
That's one of my favorite parts about this podcast, is that we get to see people that they just assume, like baseball players, we all hang out together, but it doesn't take 9 of us to do what we do. It takes 1 of us usually. So
yeah, well, back in the room in New York that the power station had 4 rooms. So if you were in the lounge getting coffee, you might run into another engineer. So you'd talk now and then. You'd see people, every day. You could exchange ideas, but we don't have that anymore. So just those opportunities to get together. I'm grateful for this too. I don't see you guys often enough, but they did a lot of events like that. Of course, there's an awards thing, and they're, it's a peer voted award. So it's very important that the integrity across the board is just as solid as can be, and they're doing the very best they can. It's a tough job and trying to please a lot of people, but ultimately, I hope when it comes to things like that, I'm certainly not in it to win awards, but I want the best music to win. The bottom line, it should. Everything that I do, it's about the music. So,
when you won your Grammy, did you go out to the?
I didn't go that year.
Didn't go.
Now I've been nominated or had a finalist, top 5 finalist, I think the last 5 years in a row, and I've gone, I think, 3 or 4 of those years and never won the big one. So I think the secret is just maybe stay
Don't
home
go.
and see if it shows up in the mail. But I didn't know that year that I'd won. You know, I saw that the artist had won, and I didn't really connect that would include me because I
Right.
didn't know much about it. I just was
The rules are a little bit, they vary from category to category.
yeah,
Who
that
gets
was
what?
never the goal, or so I never looked into it. But when it showed up, it came at a great time, and I'm proud to have it. I'd like to have a few more. So
Well, they had a really Kim and I went out the year we were nominated, and that year they did 8 awards on air and 80 off air.
right.
So they have the award show prior that's the off air awards, and it was really fun.
Yeah, I wish they'd televise. I think they call it the premiere award show. It's in the afternoon, and it's big names too. It
It's
might be
so
Tony
much-
Bennett or
It's it's all the people that you care about.
Or but it's a great show too. So I hope that they get.
I
the
miss
point.
it. I
Yeah.
miss, I get the performances, but it was like so many performances that it was like, oh yeah, there's an award every
Yeah.
22 minutes in the program,
Yeah.
I was blown away that out of the 88 awards that only 8 were on air, and having gone to the pre-awards or the off-air awards, it was such a great entertaining program. Like, I loved seeing it. There's so much anticipation every time.
Right.
It's because records in the category, people, songs, and you're like rooting for one or the other. I think they maybe underestimate that.
Yeah, it's a big job though. They're trying to make a television show with
Sure.
other collaborators in it to please everybody's tough there too. But that afternoon show, and if you go to the Grammys and you can go to both of those shows. By the time you get through that one, you've had a pretty full day of music. Yeah. So it does maybe take a little of the excitement out of the evening show. But
I've got a picture that this is maybe my favorite picture ever. My wife was.
I know exactly.
We were
It's
walking to our seats at the televised Grammys, and one of those moments where I'm like, I'm the world's best shitty photographer, rather than being the worst professional. I'd like to just stay small pond with this one. And I was walking, and the light was just perfect. And I'm like, oh, stand over here. I got to take a picture of you.
Yeah.
And I took a picture. And as I did, someone walked in front of me. And it was just on my iPhone. And I wish I could find it. I'll put it up on the screen during the edit for this one.
Okay. Hey, one thing on that, if your listeners ever get a chance to do the technical tour of the Grammy Awards, like the day before when they're doing rehearsals, it's the most wild thing you could ever imagine. Just all the technology, music, lights, and it's like a half mile of trucks and backstage and everything's the different performances on sets.
And
It's
Tim
quite a
Pierce
production.
has a really good video up about playing. He plays like 100 songs he's in the Grammy band, and for the awards.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
You have
And
to tell
that's
Ben who was the
yeah,
one
okay,
that
so let me
snuck into
finish
the
my story.
picture.
So I
It's
get
just a silhouette, by the
I
way.
look at the picture, and it's Ron Jeremy.
And it's unmistakably him, by the
And
way.
I saw him after he passed. I'm like, oh, did I get the shot? And when I looked at it, there's a perfect, who was that guy? Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
There's a perfect silhouette you'd swear was in. He's the only person you can know for sure from his silhouette who he is. It's a perfect silhouette of Ron Jeremy and my wife. A perfect, 2-shot. So I will put
love
it up.
it. Yeah.
That's my Grammy story. Hey, thank you you're a great dude.
Oh, thank you.
Where can people get a hold of you if they're interested? Are you interested in people getting a hold of you, first of all?
Sure. I think through benfowler.com or socials, I look there occasionally. I don't hang there much or post much, but trying to have an awareness of what's going on in the world. So, but yeah, my website is probably a great place too. So,
Well, it seems like if I were somebody searching for a sound that isn't a stock thing, that you seem like you're a really open-minded guy that would be like, oh, maybe we could make a record together that could be the right record for what I want to do, which I think is a great compliment.
Well, thank you. And I think I'm hopefully doing my best work now. Somebody asked me the other day, what was the thing that blew it all open? I go, I think it's happening now. I think I'm doing my best work now. So
Do you have
still learning.
one mix or one recording that you say, I can't believe that I did that. This is the tip-top perfect version of me?
No, there's a bunch I love. Somebody asked me to put a playlist together for Spotify of things I'd worked on. It was really tough. And
It's probably the thing we did together, but that's
Yeah,
okay. You don't have to talk
probably
about that.
Just give me one that
yeah,
you...
it's Mike's project.
It doesn't have to be the definitive one. Give me one that you think you really nailed.
Let's see. I'm producing this girl, Brie Doster, right now. I'm so proud of everything about it. Cool. And she's new, brand new artist, getting good digital response for CMT made her Next Up Artist of this month. So good things happening. Every song on there, I'm super, super proud
That's
of.
the sign of like a true artist. It's what you're doing right now. Not the bad company, not the, moldy oldies.
Yeah, I picked that stuff apart,
Yeah,
I wish I could do it over, and I always think, regardless, if I did it last week, I could remix it better now.
Those Clapton records are pretty killer, though.
Yeah,
I gotta say.
Well, I have a small part in that. There's
Hopefully,
a lot of good people.
Hopefully, you can take some of those Clapton dollars you made and get yourself a home Pro Tools rig.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go to Ocean Way and work.
Right.
You can actually work at your house. Mike will hook you up with that. I'll show you how it all works.
Yeah.
You let me know.
Maybe one of those.
I'll walk you through it.
It's Focusrite little two jobbers, a little two bangers. Get yourself a set of Alesis monitors. It's easy, dude.
I could get in showbiz. I love it. Yeah.
Well, thank you. You're a sweet human, and we're glad you came on and hung with us. It's a great talk. It's good for me. I told Mike, it's I enjoy it so much that it's I get to find out what other people were thinking that we don't usually get to hang out with and talk to. So it's great to have you in the room and just be able to pick your brain and whatnot. We'd love to have you on again.
Well, thank you so much. I'd love to do it and enjoyed it.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all for watching. We're signing off. We'll see you next time from the West Barn.